What is going on, my friends, and welcome back to another video on the channel. On today's video, this is going to be a lot less formal. This is going to be a little bit of a sit down, but I wanted to talk to you guys about what's going on with Luna, what's going on with UST, my opinion on where this goes from here, and if we should be selling and just completely abandoning ship, as many people do seem to be doing at this point. This is going to be a lot less focused on the technical analysis and more focused on fundamental analysis, because the fundamentals of the Terra protocol itself are the cause for the decline we saw yesterday, in my opinion, and it's a lot less just, oh, we lost a key level of support, in which we did. Don't get me wrong, the market completely shit the bed and we lost many levels of support, but I don't really accredit that to, technical analysis, okay? So what we saw yesterday, of course, was probably the most terrifying day in the Luna ecosystem. Now, some people revert back to May 2021. Of course, we do think about times like that, but realistically, if we make comparisons here, obviously when we focus specifically on UST, which kind of runs this whole ship, it was definitely much worse, okay? If we look back to December 2020, we look at May 2021, it was just definitely not of the same magnitude, right? We could see this was quite dramatic. Okay. Now, in the same time in which we saw that, we did see Luna losing its value by about 60% over the last just 4 or 5 days. And for that reason, it has caused a lot of chaos in the streets, which I do believe has also helped contribute to what we have been seeing in the broad market. Some people say, the whole Bitcoin Bitcoin and all the altcoin ecosystems themselves crashed because of Luna. I don't believe that. I definitely think they complemented each other in a way that the fear of Luna and what was going on there also contributed to the fear in the market if we lost one of our major stable coins. But I don't believe that Luna is the main cause for all the shittiness we've seen recently. Okay. Now, going forward, as a Luna investor, let me go ahead and disclose that I do have money and investments in Luna, and I do hold some UST. So for that reason, of course, I don't want you to think that there isn't any investment bias, as of course there is. I'm going to just kind of talk about my thoughts on what all is going on here and why I personally am not selling my entire positions that I do have. Now, looking at what's going on at this point, I do stand by the bias and I do stand by the thought process that selling in times of panic are the worst times to be selling. That's just my honest opinion. I have never been proven wrong yet, okay? With my investments, at least. And one thing that I've also noticed is that buying in times of panic without justified reasons will also lead to some absolutely catastrophic results, in the sense that people who bought this thing just because it was down a good bit up here in the $60 range are now sitting very, very, very underwater. So I'm the type of person who's not going to panic sell right here, but I'm not the one who's just going to blindly be buying as we hit these lows just because it's cheap. Because we have to consider that we are now starting to figure out what the fair value of Luna is, now that there is realistically a lot more shakiness and doubtfulness about the ecosystem, until the entire team itself can prove the longevity of this thing going forward. So that is kind of the basis of my argument, is the sense that going forward, realistically, you need to come to the decision, if you're thinking about selling, of your risk versus reward. Of course, that's always important. You need to consider where you over leveraged into UST, where you over leveraged into Luna itself. And then you need to come to a consideration about what are you willing to go through in the future due to your confidence in this ecosystem. So let me talk about me, and I hope you can you can apply my thought processes to yours to simply just make your own decisions, not based around mine. So what I will go ahead and say is that over the last, I would go ahead and say roughly about 4 or 5 weeks, I have slowly started to close on some of my positions, such as my Anchor Protocol position, right? Now, in Anchor Protocol, at one point, I had about $98,000, $97,000, $99,000, something like that. Sitting in Anchor Protocol, I was generating about 20%, which of course was absolutely phenomenal at the time. Who doesn't love a free 20%? I was able to bring in over the last couple months, maybe $5,000, $6,000, $7,000, and things were absolutely amazing. And I will go ahead and say that as we did start to see the shakiness, as we did start to see that this meteoric rise start to kind of waver a bit, so did my confidence in the longevity of the 20% due to current market environment in the market, just the overall ecosystem, the macro environment of the world right now. So as we started to see that, that steadiness of Anchor Protocol kind of shimmer a bit, we started to see the reserve starting to deplenish a little. We started to get a little bit of questionability of the overall maintainability and longevity of the overall 20%. I was like, you know what? Right now, I have about 70% of my overall stablecoin in UST. I don't think it is a good idea, realistically, for me to individualize and, kind of under-diversify my portfolio, even if it is a stable coin, because you never know what could happen, right? You never know what could happen. So As time has gone on, as my questions have gotten a little bit more intense, I was closing out on some of those positions with the idea that I would diversify more completely. And I think that is something that is always important. And I think that is something that people need to consider at this point right now, is that just because Luna is down significantly doesn't mean that it is justifiable, in my opinion, to make it 40-50% of your portfolio by throwing all of your cash into it just because it's cheap. Again, we're still trying to establish where the fair value of Luna is from this point. And now we also need to consider something, is that what is going to happen with Luna is realistically out of the majority of our control. Because people have to understand, this wasn't, again, a fundamental breakdown in price. This was a technical breakdown in price. This was a fundamental breakdown in price due to the overall operations in which kind of have created and molded this ecosystem. Because people have to consider the risk that we are at right now. Whenever we think about how does this thing work, let's make it simple, okay? Realistically, if you have one UST, you can go ahead and trade that in on the Terra protocol for $1 worth of Luna. Now, whenever that $1 worth of Luna is minted, that is going to, of course, increase the supply. As supply itself is increased and demand decreases in the current market conditions in which we are in, that does overall infect the inherent value of the asset being Luna, which has caused a pretty substantial fall in which we have seen right now. That is a fundamental cause that was supplemented by market conditions. But the issue that we are at this point right now, that is subject to concern and people very fairly should be concerned about, is what is going on with current market caps, because we need to put this into perspective. Whenever you consider the fact that realistically, if you want to go ahead and trade in, right, just trade in your one UST for $1 worth of Luna, that needs to be fair value, right? And so as long as there is more Luna, as long as there is $1 worth of Luna, right, you will always be able to trade in your $1 worth of UST. The issue that we are having at this exact moment is that UST has now increased in market cap over Luna. So if people were going to go ahead and try to trade in, let's go ahead and call it $16 billion worth of UST, there's not enough Luna to support that. The value of Luna in itself, the asset Luna, does not support the total market cap of UST, meaning that if everything just went freaking haywire, right, and UST was to then go ahead and go into a death spiral in which everyone was getting rid of their UST, there would be people at the bottom who are not able to get out. People call that a pyramid scheme, and that is why you're starting to see people call it a Ponzi scheme, right? Do I support the idea that Luna is a Ponzi scheme? No. Do I believe that there are some definitely some pyramid-based consistencies there? Absolutely, but so does the majority of crypto. Does that make it right? I don't know, but that's just what it is. And so my overall opinion at this point is that going forward, there is definitely room for concern, and people definitely should be concerned. I would consider myself to be a lunatic, right? A lunatic, right? In which many of us do support Luna. And that is fantastic, right? I did see a tweet earlier in which we saw, let's go ahead, maybe be able to find it. Here we go. Now I know how lunatics around in May 21 feel. The true ones stay loyal to rebuild it all. I'm not going anywhere. We are not going anywhere. Although the pain is real, we are called lunatics for a reason. Onwards, right? I support that movement, right? I'm under the belief that we've seen something similar to this before, just not to the magnitude in which we saw yesterday, and that it is going to be something that we will either figure out or we won't. So I'm under the belief that this ecosystem kind of like Ada Cardano, right? People are a little kind of culty. I think if we can just be open here, if we can be honest, kind of like a cult. And the fact that we will believe in this thing as long as there is progress being made. And that kind of forwards me into my next thought, is that as this thing does go forward, I think that this is majoritively going to be based on the actions of the team and how they do go forward to ensure the longevity of not only Luna, but UST in itself. Because what we saw yesterday, if does continue, say tomorrow CPI data comes out and it's terrible and we see this market absolutely spiral, bringing Luna down with it, who's to say that UST doesn't go through another one of these massive depegging events? And so what I think is going to be important is that going forward, we do figure out, how does Luna, the team in itself, the people behind Terra Protocol, how do they figure out the longevity of this thing? How do they figure out the ways in which to implement certain functions, or the ways to back UST, or the ways to hold even reserves that are not accessible in times like these? How do they figure out the ways to create longevity? That's what I'm waiting for. And based off of what we have seen historically from Luna, I am under the belief that they will figure it out. We saw that Duquan announced just earlier, closing to announcing a recovery plan for USD. Hang tight. Things like these that show that they are actively looking for solutions to problems are things that create successful businesses or create business failures. And I think that's why it's so important that when we invest into these projects, that we are investing into teams in which we believe in, so that in times like these, although it sucks, I've lost a shit ton of money, I'm sure you've lost a shit ton of money, that we have a team that we understand, has experience in this field, has been through things like this, and will create some type of formula to bring this thing from the ashes. So my current opinion right now is that if you don't believe in Luna and you were just chasing this thing just to chase it, and that you were just being greedy realistically, looking for gains, looking for profits, but you don't really know much about the protocol, nor you actually are invested into the team, you definitely are in a position in which you should be concerned. And I'm not going to take that away from you. I'm not going to say, no, you shouldn't be concerned right now, because realistically you should be, right? When we see UST's market cap over Luna's at this exact point, there is risk there, okay? Whenever we see Terra, UST struggling to get back to peg, and at one point depegging over 35%, you absolutely should be concerned. And if you decide to sell, I definitely think that you need to start to evaluate the risk in which you are taking to the upside as well as the downside. And if you come to the conclusion that I overinvested in the Luna because I was looking at this thing as just an easy way for me to make money, and at this point with all of these risks, I'm not willing to just keep that much money invested into something I don't believe in, I think you're totally justified in selling. But do understand there will be people who remain, such as myself. There will be people such as the other lunatics, right, who do support this ecosystem, and that if Duquan and the entire team, in its own, do come to some type of conclusion and create the sustainability, maintainability, and longevity for UST and Luna, I am under the belief that that will then relate and, kind of represent growth within both ecosystems, which definitely could increase the price from the levels in which we are now. So it is a very important deciding factor in your own livelihood of the risk you are willing to take based on the overall confidence and faith that you have in this team to figure this shit out, okay? Because that's what it comes down to. Will they figure this shit out or will they not? And so my overall opinion right now is that although there are risks and there are concerns and things that we absolutely should be worried about, it comes down to, are you confident enough in the team and the protocol and the ecosystem and the overall, the supporters to come to conclusions that will justifiably get this thing back to where it previously was or not? And if you have that confidence, I definitely personally, which I do, I have that confidence to say, I think they can figure it out. I'm going to sit back, hang on, and hope for the best. I'm not accumulating at this point until they tell me what the game plan is and I come to a conclusion of whether I think it is feasible. But at this point, I'm not going to be selling. I'm not going to just be completely destroying my positions, getting rid of everything at this major loss, because I do believe that this team can figure it out and that going forward, there is potential for there to be a return to greatness as we do start to see this market hopefully find a bottom soon. So I hope you guys did just listen to my thoughts, and I hope it is something that made sense. I might sound like a fucking lunatic, of course, but at the end of the day, that's just the game we play. We all have things that we support and we just kind of go with the flow and we kind of just hope for the best, because realistically, none of us are in major control here. So overall, that's my update. That's what I think about Luna. That's kind of where my mindset's at. It's not really in our control. It's on the team. And it comes down to what they do, what their game plan is. And then you establish that, you decide whether you think it's feasible, and then you make decisions of whether or not that investment is right for you. So don't let anyone tell you you can't sell. Don't let anyone tell you you shouldn't sell. Don't let anyone tell you you shouldn't be buying. You need to be able to come to those conclusions yourselves. And I hope my thought process helps influence even further, deeper, critical thoughts for you. With that said, though, that's going to be about it, and I will see you all next time. Peace.